When darkness falls on a household, when hope feels like a distant, faded memory, that's often when the impossible happens. This is the story of a woman pushed to the very edge, who found that the end of her resources was the beginning of a miracle. Imagine the scene. A woman whose husband had been a faithful follower of God now stands alone. Her grief is still fresh, but a new, more terrifying threat is at her door. We read in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 4, verse 1, that she cried out to the prophet Elisha, saying,
"Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord. Now the creditor has come to take for himself my 2 children to be slaves."
In her world, death didn't erase debt, and creditors they didn't forget. They weren't coming for money this time, because she had none. They were coming for her sons. In the ancient world, this was the brutal reality of debt. Her children, her legacy, her only joy, were about to be torn from her arms and sold into slavery to pay what was owed. She had maybe one day, maybe less. In her desperation, with the walls closing in, she knew of only one place to turn: Elisha, the man of God, the prophet who carried the mantle of Elijah, the one who spoke with the voice of God himself. She runs to him, her voice choked with panic, laying bare her impossible situation. And what does this powerful prophet do? He doesn't command lightning from the sky or summon an army. Elisha said to her, "What should I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house?" She said, "Your servant has nothing in the house except a pot of oil." 2 Kings, chapter 4, verse 2. But to Elisha, this nothing was the seed of everything. He gives her the most peculiar instructions. Then he said, "Go, borrow empty containers from all your neighbors. Don't borrow just a few containers. Go in and shut the door on you and on your sons, and pour oil into all those containers, and set aside those which are full." 2 Kings, chapter 4, verse 3. Can you imagine her confusion? Borrow empty jars? What good are empty containers for empty hands? But there must have been something in the prophet's eyes, a certainty in his voice that cut through her fear. This was no ordinary request. This was a command of faith. So she goes. She knocks on door after door, facing the pity and skepticism of her neighbors. "May I borrow your empty pots?" They probably thought her grief had finally broken her, but she does it. She gathers the jars, brings them into her home, and with her 2 sons, the very ones she's fighting for, she shuts the door. Behind that closed door, in the secrecy of that small room, with only her sons as witnesses, she picks up her one meager jar of oil. She tilts it over the first empty vessel, and she begins to pour, and the oil flows, and it keeps flowing. The first vessel fills to the brim. She sets it aside. She picks up another. The oil continues to pour from her tiny jar. Logic didn't matter anymore. The laws of nature, the principles of physics, they were suspended. 1 jar became 10, 10 became 20, 20 became 50. Her small pot, that one humble container, held an ocean. An impossible infinite supply, flowing silently in the secrecy of her home. She pours and pours, her sons scrambling to bring her the next empty vessel, their astonishment turning to wide-eyed wonder. When the containers were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another container." He said to her, "There isn't another container." Then the oil stopped flowing. 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 6. When she returned to Elisha, she was a different woman. She came not as a desperate, pleading widow, but as a witness to the impossible. She told the man of God what had happened, and he gave her the final piece of the puzzle. He said, "Go, sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons live on the rest." 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 7. From nothing came everything. From a single jar of oil came freedom. The creditors were paid. Her sons were saved. And what was left over? Enough, more than enough to live on. A future secured from a present that had none. But here's the part of the story that always stays with me. Why did this incredible miracle happen in private, behind a closed door? Why didn't Elisha just have her pour the oil in the town square, where everyone could see the power of God on display? Perhaps it's because some of God's greatest miracles aren't meant to be public spectacles. They're meant for the quiet room, for the intimate space between our desperation and His provision. Faith, it seems, often requires privacy. It requires a closed door, away from the doubting eyes of the world, and the simple, trusting willingness to pour when it makes no logical sense. Notice her role in this. God provided the miracle, but she had to participate in it. She had to take the first step of obedience, borrowing the empty jars. She had to be the one to shut the door, creating the sacred space for the miracle. And she and her sons had to do the pouring. She couldn't just sit back and wait for the pots to fill themselves. The question for us then isn't just, what did God do? The more personal question is, what did she bring? She brought the little she had. She brought obedience against all logic. She brought the quiet faith to shut the door and pour. And that was enough. So let me ask you, what do you have in your house? What is that small thing you're holding on to, thinking it's too little, too insignificant to possibly matter in the face of your overwhelming need? Your small talent, your limited energy, your tiny bit of hope. Maybe, just maybe, that's the very thing God is asking for, the very thing He wants to take and multiply behind the closed door of your faith. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. We'd love to have you as part of our community.